Hello, and welcome to this Monday mini edition of the Scrimshaw Show. My name is Scrimshaw, unsurprisingly. On today's episode, we're just going to be diving in on one topic. It's a Monday mini, 15 minutes on anything and everything that's on my mind. We'll be back on Wednesdays with our regularly scheduled full podcasts. This Wednesdays will be a solo podcast, but I am working on guests for the future. I've got a few things in the irons that I'm very excited about. But for now, I just want to dig in on one thing about the Ontario election that's getting a lot of interest and a lot of conversation, but I don't think people have really thought through. And that's the idea of a sort of progressive alliance, right? An NDP liberal deal or some sort of, whether it's formal or whether or not the polls just need to break because vote splitting is the big risk to the Ford government. And the thing is, it's not. If the Liberals and the NDP are to beat Doug Ford, are to knock him out of majority government, and to elect a hung legislature, which would then inevitably put in government of second place, they're going to need Doug Ford's popularity to go down. Because a lot of people just think, oh, if we get rid of the vote splitting, the Liberals or the NDP, whichever party got that lead, would win. And the problem is, it's not that simple, guys. With the map as it's constituted after 2018, there's a big problem for the left, which is I don't know which party they're supposed to support, right? And every option you choose is not great, right? The current situation is, the Conservatives are on 61 seats, which is not a majority government, but also a very thin, but also 2 seats away from being majority government. But what you have is a bunch of people who are convinced that, but the problem is vote splitting, and if we could just surge one of the parties at the other's expense, everything would be fine. And it's not. Because what happens is, if you take 4 or 5 points off the NDP's vote, give it to the Liberals, yes, the Liberals will win more seats. The Liberals will do better in Mississauga, in Scarborough, and in Halton. But the chances that the NDP win seats that either they currently hold or that they might otherwise possibly gain in Kitchener and Brampton go out the window. Invert it, if you want the NDP to pick up the 2 Brampton seats they don't currently hold, plus the Kitchener seats, because Kitchener South Hespeler and Kitchener-Conestoga, neither of which are held federally by the Conservatives, are held very narrowly by the PCs. Well, your chances of those seats going orange are functionally gone. And then you get into this other question of, so what happens in the NDP marginals, specifically Oshawa, Essex, and Niagara Centre, 3 industrial working class seats, which have had conservative-leaning trend lines and are all seats where, if you believe the global fucking realignment, you will be unsurprised to find out the Conservatives are in a good position to win. The problem with the Progressive Alliance talk or some form of notion of, tactical voting will save us is that I don't know what your tactical vote is, right? In specific ridings, I can tell you what the tactical vote is, and if anyone ever wants to know, my DMs are open. But the problem is that if Doug Ford's at 35%, he's probably going to get around 60 seats, because if the Liberals are stronger, then he'll do worse in Mississauga, Halton, and Scarborough, but he'll do better in Brampton and Kitchener. He'll probably win Essex, Niagara Centre, and Oshawa. And these problems don't go away if you invert it, because, then Mississauga is going to probably stay blue, or the Liberals are going to win less seats in Scarborough, Etobicoke, maybe even Mississauga. Whether the Liberals can get Milton and Oakville gets harder. There's no clear tactical vote, and unless the political parties were to formalize some arrangement, there's no real way to see it getting any better, right? Unless Stephen Del Duca basically instructs his Kitchener and Brampton campaigns to functionally go dead, and Andrew Horvath does the same in Mississauga and the conservative held Scarborough seats. It's just not going to happen, guys. And the problem is that Doug Ford's at 35%, and if Doug Ford's at 35%, he's very, very plausible to get reelected. And it doesn't really matter what happens with the Liberal and NDP vote. It doesn't matter how coalesced they are or not, because the problem is that too many people want to elect the Conservatives, and the Conservative vote is still efficient enough that they have a lot of different paths. Now, ideally, what would happen is Liberal NDP switchers in Kitchener and Brampton vote NDP to wipe out Conservative incumbents there. And then in Mississauga, Etobicoke, the Don Valley, and Scarborough, it's those voters vote for the Liberals, right? The problem is that the vast majority of people are not going to do that. The vast majority of Ontarians do not read My Site or Lean Tossup or 338 or Grenier. I don't know if Brian's doing predictions, but too close to call if he is, right? They aren't paying attention. They aren't paying the specific localized attention that you would need to pull off a vote switching mechanism at the level you would need. And it's just not going to happen. Andrew Horvath has shown limited willingness to ever work towards a progressive future with Liberal governments in terms of electoral politics. Andrew Horvath would very much like to replace the Liberals as the lead progressive party. So she has no incentive to stand down Mississauga campaigns. She doesn't want to be seen as a localized party again. And the Liberals need to fight for relevance. So they're not going to stand down Kitchener seats. They're not going to stand down Conestoga and Conestoga and Kitchener South Hespeler. These are seats held by the federal party. They're not going to say, nah, the NDP, you can have them. That's not how this is going to work. I mean, the other thing is that these parties have to fight for second place, because in a situation where Doug Ford gets the most seats and less than 63, whoever comes in second is going to be premier by the end of the year. We've seen it with Christy Clark and John Horgan in BC in 2017. We've seen it in... No, I think Blaine Higgs had more seats anyways in New Brunswick in 2018. Hell, we've seen it in Ontario in 1985, right? And the problem is that this sort of notion that, if we just work together and kumbaya, we'll get there. No, we won't. Thinking that voters can be manipulated, that the forces of progressivism can massage the vote enough that liberals in liberal areas, that liberal NDP switchers in liberal areas will go one way and then in NDP areas they'll go another, assumes a level of interest and a level of sophistication in electorates that doesn't exist. It just doesn't, right? I know my readership. I know what the only possible readership was. I have no idea what Grenier Fournier is obviously, but the people who read these kinds of websites are not sophisticated. They are very sophisticated. They are not representative of the average sophistication of the voters. They are not indicative of anything. They are, and I love you for it because I am also one of you, but we are the 1%ers. We are the craziest of the crazies. And we know all the permutations, and we know all the combinations, and we know that if you live in Mississauga, you vote one way if you want the best chance to get rid of a conservative incumbent, and if you live in, you live 20 minutes up the road, you vote a different way, right? We know that your best tactical vote, that your tactical option doesn't really matter if you're in St. Catharines, where the Conservatives are currently expected to be third. But in the seat south of it, your best tactical option is the NDP, and the seat east of it, you probably don't have to vote tactically, but you still would probably vote NDP, right? We know this, but we also don't realize the number of people who know that is not that large. And at the end of the day, the Doug Ford can easily be beaten. I currently don't have him winning a majority government. It's very narrow. He very easily could. What you end up with, though, is a situation where a lot of people want the easy way out of beating him, which is just, well, Liberals and NDP do a deal. No. If Doug Ford's at 35%, then we're in trouble. And that's just the fundamental truth. Beating Doug Ford is not going to be about realigning or coalescing the opposition in the most tactically optimal way. It's going to be by driving his 35% in the polls down to 31, which is what Stephen Harper got federally in 2015 when he lost. Like, yes, Justin Trudeau got a majority government because he managed to successfully squeeze the NDP down, but Stephen Harper lost government because Harper went from 40% of the vote to 31. Doug Ford's at 35%, and that's the bigger problem. People need to fight. People need to fight an election under the actual fight they're having, and they need to actually make sure that they're fighting the right battle. And too many people want to will this election into being a fight between the NDP and the Liberals for which is the best progressive option, and then just fundamentally ignoring the massive problem, which is too many Ontarians. And yes, I'm just gonna be honest here. I think Doug Ford's a joke, right? I'm not gonna pretend otherwise. Too many fellow Ontarians think Doug Ford's doing a good job right now. That's the problem. Like, at the end of the day, we can have as much infighting and as much intrigue about the Liberal NDP battle. And believe me, I'm getting into it because right now you can read an article at my Substack called "What is the Point of the Ontario NDP?" I get it. I get that I'm also a contributor to this, right? That said, it's about Ford. And the Liberals and the NDP need to make sure that they are fighting the right fight, because they are not going to be able to tactical vote their way into office. They're going to have to persuade some number of people who currently want to vote for Doug Ford that they can't, that they should not want to, and that voting for him is bad. And every second that progressive liberal people spend fighting amongst themselves instead of fighting the Ford government is a moment wasted. If you want my tactical, if you want my tactical suggestions, if you are an Ontario voter who cares, it's Kitchener and Brampton, you vote NDP. Basically everywhere else you vote Liberal. If you're in a safe Liberal NDP seat, I don't really give a damn. I'm voting for Stephen Del Duca because I think Adrian Horvath would be a mediocre premier, and I have no faith that she would be able to do anything for this province. Stephen Del Duca has a chance. I'm genuinely excited for Del Duca. I think he would be a good premier. That's what I'm doing. But I'm also in a riding where the Liberals are the right tactical vote. If I was in Kitchener, I'd vote NDP. But at the end of the day, and I mean this with full honesty, right? At the end of the day, it's easy to fight between the Liberals and the NDP. It's easy to get caught up in a fight of left-wing nonsense, and that's not the fight we need to be having. Strategic voting and tactical voting will not work because the vast majority of people do not care what I have to say or what PJ Forney has to say or Eric Rennie has to say, right? You cannot persuade people with just pie-in-the-sky notions of tactical voting. You will persuade people to vote for your candidate on the basis that your candidate has the right ideas. And too many people think that they can skip the battle of ideas and just get right to the point where they figure out how to best tactically get rid of Doug Ford. Because too many people have taken for granted the notion that Doug Ford is unfit for the office. I agree that he is. I think Doug Ford is a catastrophic fuck-up of a premier. But too many people on the left have taken that for granted and assumed the only question about the next election is whether it's going to be a Liberal government or a Liberal government or an NDP one. And that mistake might cost us. It might put Doug Ford back into Queen's Park in majority government. Follow me on Twitter at eScrimshaw. Follow the show on Twitter at Scrimshaw _show. Read my writing at scrimshawunscripted.substack.com. Buy Salvation in the Storm if you haven't already. The reviews are coming in fast and thick and fast, and everyone seems to think it's good. Buy it for me, if for nothing else. And have a good week, everybody. I'll be back with the solo pod on Wednesday.